Hi, folks. Excuse me. Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the idea of affirmative action, diversity, equity, inclusion, recruitment for the police force. Now, I think anyone with eyes can see that the standard of folks that they're hiring in the police force has diminished. It's gone downhill quite considerably, as it has, by the way. And whether you're looking at the corporate world, the public service, or whatever, I had the need to access someone in a public service institution yesterday, and I was shocked that they actually speak English as a first language. I mean, it's so rare now that you're in a state of shock. But nonetheless, just having a look at policing. There was some sort of a disturbance going on in the town a little while ago, and I was a bit of a distance from it. There were some people gawking at it, and this tiny little female police officer came along. If she was 5 foot tall, that would be it. She also was she was more than 100 pounds, because she was looked very unfit. You know, just the width of her ass was like twice the width of the shoulders and everything. So she in a very snotty sort of voice told these gawkers to move on. Now, if they'd said no, we're not going anywhere, there's fuck all she could have done. I mean, given her size, her lack of fitness, and so on, other than pulling out the gun and shooting them. I don't think it's a good idea to have people like that, like her, carrying guns. But anyway, this is wherever you go now, you notice, and not just female cops too. Male cops are also, this idea of the 6 foot tall, solidly built dude as the cop. No, not that those people don't exist anymore, but they're long gone. Or the idea that they're the standard is long gone. And so the idea of you have to produce lots of minorities, straight, white, 6 foot tall, fit, capable men. No. And they are now in the clear minority, whereas that used to be all you'd see as a cop. As a kid, all the cops I remember were guys who, again, 6 foot, solidly built, and so on. Some of them were ex-army, or even ex-military police. I knew some in that category. But that's all changed now. Again, it wasn't always that way. The first time I went to the United States, I had to go. It was Los Angeles that I went to, and I managed to get Sunday off, and I still had the car that the company had rented for me, and so I went over to, at the time this was in summer, so I went over to Venice Beach in Los Angeles. Which is a very famous, internationally famous. It's there's a section of it where they've got an outdoor gym, and it's referred to as Muscle Beach. So anyway, I walked out. It's a long promenade. It might be over a mile, I would think. And it was very busy, and there's lots of people doing juggling acts and fire breathers and rappers. It's where I first actually encountered rap. So I'm going along there, and there's quite a decent police presence, and I was surprised that there was all the cop teams there, a male and a female. Now each one of the female cops there was easily 6 foot, and solidly, heavily built, 200 pounds, easily over 200 pounds, and more than 100 kilograms, and so I was surprised. Firstly, you didn't see it back in Australia at the time. You didn't see many female cops at all, and certainly not on the street. Like being clerical roles, but not out on the street. And they were, they weren't the size of this woman. So this first female cop, so I was surprised. Now the guy was, the male cop who was her partner was bigger than her. And so got two very big. Now this woman was the size of her. I don't think she'd have gone chasing after somebody. Like if there's somebody who's fleet of foot, I doubt very much she'd have even a slight chance of catching them. But if it came to like a sort of physical struggle, wrestle or something on the spot, I think she'd be more than capable of that. But big, strong girl, and looked. If I remember looking at her, because she came by where I was standing watching this sort of street act, and she looked meaner than a rattlesnake. But and then I looked at the other women, female cops along that sort of stretch of Venice Beach, and they were all similarly built. They were big solid chicks, I don't know, 30-ish, and all were pushing 6 foot, and all were 200 pounds plus. So again, I hadn't seen that before, so I thought, holy crap. Now, as the years went by and I was sort of going around the US, it became the female cops became shorter and less fit. And some of them were so wide or so small and diminutive and frail that I don't think they could have, they'd have blown over in a light breeze. And so there was over time, the idea was that the more and more black chicks as cops and black men and minorities generally, whether they could be Hispanic or whatever. And so, and also the community they serve. So if you go to Chinatown in San Francisco, as an example, all the cops there were Chinese. Now, I mean, I don't mind. Hey, who cares? Maybe they were, they spoke with American accents. Maybe they could speak Chinese. I don't know. It's probably be more Cantonese they'd speak around there, I guess, rather than Mandarin. But I don't know why you need that. Cops are meant to be impartial and for all the people, not just for special racial groups. So even at that age, when I was a young guy in my early 20s, I thought, no, I don't like the look of that. Or in Hispanic areas, you see Hispanic cops. Again, I didn't see the need for that. There should be no need to do that sort of thing. The police are impartially upholding and applying the law, and that should be the end of it. And if that's not the case, then they should be appropriately trained to do this. So already you could see many signs of the politicization of the police and the justice system, even then. And this is like early mid-80s, So I thought this was bigger, but in line with that, and I was going to the US regularly, for over a decade. I was going to the US quite regularly, and more than that, longer than that even. And say 15 years, I was going on a very regular basis, almost once a month, or maybe not quite that much, once every couple of months maybe, and spending 1 to 2 weeks there. And I saw this decline, so that if, particularly if in the Northeast, you would see 5 foot tall, 100-pound chicks pretending to be cops, but it was all seemed to be a game of playing doll's house. It never seemed to be genuine policing, but or even in parts of New York as well. Now, this was done for the purposes of social equity and the community we serve and all this sort of nonsense. But it should never have been about that. It should have just been about policing, not about social politicization and social justice and equity and all this sort of stuff, which it became. So it ceased to be policing at a certain point, is where I'm leading up to here, and instead became some sort of politicized game of social engineering, which is where we are today. Now, the concern that I had, and I think everybody has, is in order to get these equal outcomes, the standards had to be lowered and lowered again, and then lowered some more, and then lowered after that. So now I remember, police officers they'd be getting their annual sort of physical check, and they had to be able to run the 100 meters in under 13 seconds, for example. That was one of the 100 yards, 100 meters in under 13 seconds. That was one of the requirements, and it's quite rigorous. And I remember the police officers, certainly that I was aware of, they'd go on a 2-month sort of training, 2 to 3 month training regimen. Every morning they'd be out jogging and running and sprinting and going down to the local sports field and to get up their fitness so they could pass the test. Such was the rigor. Because if you failed the test, then there were serious consequences. It was a strictly pass or fail system back in the time. And the reason there were no women cops, because women just couldn't pass the test. Now there was I remember a woman who was a track and field athlete, and she joined the police. She could pass it, but you're looking at 1 in 1,000 there. She was one of the very few. I think she was the only woman in the state that actually made the grade back in the time. That's how rare it was. But it still was open to women who could make the grade. You had to make the grade though, but the job was there if you could. But they couldn't make the grade, so they lowered the standard. And then it became women could do the 100 meters in 20 seconds instead of under 13 seconds for men. Now, 7 seconds across 100 meters of running, I mean, that's like 30 or 40 meters difference. And then it was reduced again. So I think it was 25 seconds. It was, so pretty much every fitness and strength and capability standard that existed was all dispensed with in order to create equity. Now, this is the problem with equity, whether it be in the police force or the fire department or anywhere. It doesn't matter, in business. I come across equity hirings all the time. Just a few days ago, we were dealing with a brown woman from a third world country who was transferred here through an activist NGO and has now been hired by a medical company, a drug company, and she's now the global vice president or something after 3 years. I mean, you're kidding me, right? Again, this need to engage in acts of equity for people who just don't make the grade. We have to go back to a system of merit. But again, if the standards of merit had been held in place, there'd be hardly any women at all in so the frontline policing. I'm not talking about clerical work in the back office. So we need to return to that. And the same with men. There are men that clearly wouldn't have passed the physical. Far from it. There was a man I saw, was probably 5'2". He was so scrawny. The gun he was carrying, in the holster was bigger than he was almost. And he's a police officer walking around. I mean, that guy didn't pass any physical, for goodness sakes. So this is it. A return to merit will do away with all of this. I mean, the merit prevents social engineering by ideology. And we need to accept that merit is the antidote for all of these things. We must apply it as quickly and rigorously as we can. You've been a Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.